You're listening to the All In Podcast with your hosts, Shane and Blake, giving you a new perspective on the dental industry. Are you ready to go all in?
Let's do this.
And welcome to the All In Podcast. The podcast brings you a new perspective on the dental industry and sometimes other stuff. I'm your host, Shane McElroy, and thanks for joining me today. Listen, I told you I'd start getting more consistent with the episodes, and I did not lie. I might lie because it may not be consistent all the time, but at least 2 weeks in a row, you're getting a new episode. So, yeah, there you go. Way to go, Shane. But I'm excited about this episode today. For all you nerds out there, and there's a couple in the dental community I've heard, and all you wannabe nerds, kind of like me, who don't know much about technology, and maybe you want to learn more, but you're afraid to ask questions because you're an idiot. Well, guess what? I'm going to be the idiot for you and ask a bunch of stupid questions. So that brings us to our guest today. And I don't even remember how I met Christian, but I met him through a different connection in the network a couple of years ago. And he's kind of advanced in the dental community, really knows the tech side really well. And I'll let him kind of give you a background on him. But welcome to the podcast, Christian Pusateri. What's up, brother?
Thanks, Shane. How you doing, man? And by the way, it was J.D. Davis.
Oh, God. J.D. Davis?
The one and only.
That turncoat. He's jumped from every cup in the world. Just went from Nobel to my old territory at BioHorizons. I literally played a golf tournament with J.D. Davis yesterday.
Oh, cool. Oh man, that's great. You guys still live close by,
yeah,
right?
Man. We live in a town called Peachtree City. He lives a few miles away from me, and he hits the ball a long ways. And so I recruited him on a scramble team, which we do from time to time. We were 30 under in this stupid tournament and got third place. 30 under. It's absurd.
No way. Whoa.
Yeah, crazy.
That's competitive.
Crazy, but all good. So that's all the shout out that JD's going to get. I forgot about that. That's right. So anyways, forget him. Let's learn more about you. Can you give the audience just like a fast forward background of who you are, what you do, how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So I'm doing business development for a company called ClaroNav, and I've been in the industry for about 12 years. Started out doing sales. I've worked for some of the biggest names in the industry, and then all the way down to startups and mid caps in between. Got to work DC market, LA market, all the Southwest. I'm now currently in Miami. I was in New York for a few years. So just kind of seen a lot of the early adoption markets in this country and worked with some really great key opinion leaders. And I just think it's a really fun place to be and really exciting. And I'm so lit up by how much technology comes to us first. And so, yeah.
So you said ClaroNav right now. And for the audience, yeah. I know what ClaroNav does. Why don't you tell them what ClaroNav does though?
So they developed surgical navigation. They started doing it in neurology in the 90s. Really small spaces, and when you're inside the body and you're working in really small spaces, and you want to see where your drill is, for example, in real time. They created the visualization software to do that, and the camera tracking technology to do that. And then it started, once it kind of became standard of care in neurology, it started to disperse into other sectors. So it went into spine, ENT, and then in around 2015, FDA approval for oral maxillofacial. And so for 6 years, they've been selling globally. And I do business development sales. That's a fancy word for just sales in the US.
Yeah. For all you doctors out there that don't know, you hear business development, that's sales.
Just need sales. That's all we're doing. We're just trying to get units out there and to get people to like what we do and to try the technology out and see how it makes a difference.
So this started in other industries, which is interesting because a lot of times you see it go the other way. But it's dynamic guided surgery, right? It's watching a screen. It's prepping, planning a case ahead of time, being able to visualize on a screen what you're doing, which makes sense in a lot of other spaces in the medical industry. But it's a bit newer for dentistry. Obviously in the last 4 or 5 years, it's taken off a lot more. Is that a correct assessment on it from a dumbass?
It is. Yeah, I told you, Shane. People aren't going to buy that narrative, man. You're not a dumbass. But yeah, there's two core components of technology. One is just a camera that is tracking what's going on. It's looking for black and white patterns. We put these black and white patterns on the patient, on the handpiece, so we know where everything is. And then the actual software itself is an algorithmic software. So you have to develop both of those components, and when you put them together, you're talking about heads up, real time, navigated surgery. So yeah, in dentistry, and I don't know who coined the term, it is called dynamic navigation. But in other disciplines, it's just called surgical navigation.
Oh, really? So we just try to trump it up to make it sound a lot cooler in dental?
Yeah, I don't know. And I was talking to my VP about that because in ENT and in neuro, it's still called surgical navigation.
Huh.
It's not called dynamic. So I don't know.
Wow.
Somebody branded it a certain way. They did a good job because everyone in dentistry knows it as dynamic.
Yeah, whoever the marketing person was who came up with that one, kudos to you. Kudos to you. So I've been involved in some dynamic guided cases. How has it improved? Because listen, I'm going to give it to you straight, and not specifically with your system. I've seen it with other systems out there. Sometimes it's really good, and other times it just feels like it slows down the process. So what are the, give it to me straight. Like, what are the real benefits for somebody, and what are some of the drawbacks, right? Because I got some of my oral surgeon buddies who are just like, they used a different system. Where like, I could do this a lot faster on my own, or just with a static guide, right?
Yeah, there's a learning curve. There was a learning curve to an intraoral scanner when those really started going gangbusters 5-6 years ago. Doctors, not every doctor was scanning an arch in 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's true.
It was taken, when you were new to a three shape, it took you 3 minutes to scan an arch. Now doctors are doing it in 30 seconds, and they're posting all their times on Instagram and Snapchat, and they're like, look how fast I did. So yeah, there's a learning curve to it. And when doctors are figuring it out, they're not used to looking up at a screen the whole time.
Yeah.
They're used to looking at the patient's mouth. They're looking at the site. So you're dealing with that a little bit. But really, if you look at where the industry's going, 20 years ago, who had a cone beam? Every doctor was just kind of palpating, feeling it out, looking at it, and just figuring out, how much ridge height do I have? What's my interproximal space? How thick is the gingiva? This was stuff that the doctor was just pretty much going off instinct and experience. Now, if you don't use a cone beam, that could potentially put you in more trouble if something goes wrong in the case than not using a cone beam. So the industry is trending toward more visualization. I want to see more of the patient. I want to plan better. I want more accuracy, more clarity, more crispness in the image. So this is kind of dynamic navigation is like the next step in the digital workflow revolution. It's like, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and just assume that you're already going to get a DICOM of this patient. Either you've got a cone beam in house or you're going to outsource it.
Which you're going to do. You're going to have that for any type of guide.
You're going to have exactly. You're going to have that.
Or
so now
treatment planning software for the most part. I guess there's some you can do with PANS, but it's not very accurate, obviously.
Well, if you're using a treatment planning software, what are you planning on? You're still planning on the cone.
No, that's what I'm saying, right? There's not really any out there that I'm aware of that you have to have a 3D.
Oh, right.
You have to have a 3D scan. Otherwise, you're just really it's just Photoshop.
Exactly. It's a foregone conclusion that you're going to have it. So it's like, well, now import that and plan. And then once you're doing the surgery, with a static guide, you're using that cone beam to make a guide that you're just trusting day of. If it doesn't deliver, you're screwed. And it's still not telling you where your burr is in real time. So that's the benefit of navigation is you're looking at a screen, you're looking at the DICOM, you're seeing your burr overlaid on the DICOM. You see exactly where you are in the patient's anatomy.
Let me ask you this. Everybody assumes that it's for just like placing implants, but are there any other procedures that it can be used for in the dental space?
Oh my God.
Because I've seen a few, there's like Dr. Hartman, I've seen him do a lot of different cool grafting cases and things like that. But what other ways can this kind of technology be utilized?
Well, and I think that's what's helping to make it pop. There's a lot of armamentarium that you already need for implants. You got to get your kit, your implants, your drills. You might have to be involved with your lab. There's already a lot there. Once doctors realize, hey, this isn't just for implants. We're talking about you can do saw cuts, you can do apicoectomies, you can do canal accesses, we've got doctors doing, approval is different across the globe. So we don't have approval for all these things yet in the States. We got doctors doing mandibulectomies.
So like you're talking about on label versus off label, right? Just because it just hasn't been tested and approved.
It doesn't have FDA approval. Right. It'll be approved in Canada, for example, but not here yet.
Gotcha.
Right. We're just waiting to approve some of the stuff. But yeah, you're talking about well over, we're probably approaching a dozen different types of procedures that you can do. So
what's probably the biggest one besides implants?
In the last year, we found that a huge application is canal access, because if you're using, the static guide has kind of been the solution for implants and canal accesses alike for the last several years. The problem is that, the static guide is great for an implant because you can be a third of a millimeter off on an implant and probably still have a nice osteotomy in terms of angulation or, mesial, distal, whatever. But when you're talking about a third of a millimeter off of a canal is only a millimeter thick. I mean, you could totally still miss the canal. So even though endodontists have been using static guides to find canals, they're finding that this is actually way better to locate them, because you're looking at the DICOM in real time. And as long as you've got a crisp cone beam image, you can see it really well, see exactly where it is. You can plan your entry point. And our accuracy, all the third-party data so far, most of it is putting us as more accurate than static guides.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, don't you have all right, so what doesn't that require like fiduciary indicators and things like that? And what is that, by the way? So explain it, because I won't be able to explain it properly.
I will not explain it, Shane, because we are beyond that.
Well, explain what it is till you know what. How dare you? And hilariously,
our competitor, the competitors still use those. That's one of our competitive advantages. But yeah, it's if you're taking the cone beam, you typically have to put in some sort of fiducial marker. So the patient goes into the cone beam to take that. They go to take that picture with that in the mouth, and that marker just helps determine where everything is when you import it into the software, which with XNav is proprietary. We found a way to kind of bypass that, so we don't need a fiducial marker.
Oh, really? Well, that's nice. So do you have to have any pieces in the mouth when you're doing any type of surgery?
Not for the image taking, but yeah, for the surgery, we do have a tag. We either have a kind of like a headband with a tag on it, or we have one that just attaches to the tooth. It's very minimal, very small, and just kind of shows the black and white pattern outside the mouth.
Well, that's pretty cool. I didn't actually know that. So well done. All right. You're a tech nerd, right? You like all sorts of tech in the industry, whether it be dental and medical. Let's talk some of the new stuff that you either think's coming out, is coming out, has just come out. That's kind of exciting. It doesn't have to be in the implant space at all. I do not care, but just new technology that we'll start adopting more in dentistry, even if it's already in the medical space too. We're way behind, obviously. So what are kind of like the 2 or 3 things that you think is like badass that people should start paying attention to?
What's really cool, I think, about it's funny, you and I know, being in dental for so long, there is a difference between dental and medical. It just seems like a lot of the big money stuff, like
there's a lot more money in the medical space.
Right. Sure. There just is. And it has to do with insurance reimbursement and everything else. But even though that is true in dental, because so much of it it's basically all private practice based, there is a little less regulatory. There's less gatekeepers. So we do get a lot of cool technology, and you have a lot of small companies innovating. What I saw both my company do over COVID and others is they started training their algorithms to help with the treatment planning. So like some of the features that we're going to have in our software soon are basically identifying the jawline curve, which some softwares already have, but we're going to get to the point where it's identifying hopefully certain aspects of the patient that will help eventually suggest a treatment plan for the doctor.
So is that through AI?
No, that's AI. Yeah, that's AI. And where we're going to see this first is from the companies that either own or custody all of the data, all of the patient scans.
Yep, I've seen that. Like we had Kyle Stanley in the podcast.
So to give you an idea, like with like 2,500, I think it was like 3,000 scans we used to basically get our AI accurate with determining occlusal plane within 90% accuracy. Now that's great, but 90% is nowhere where it needs to be to go to market, right? So we need to get that up around 99. Well, even though it only took about 3,000 scans to get to 90, it would take like 30,000 to get that remaining 9% accuracy. Gotcha. So you just need a lot of data. And so the companies sitting on the most data, they're either custodying a lot of it. Like they're the ones that can really build this faster. And that's what's really exciting to me, because you're talking about a world where, and I'm thinking that we're probably 24 months away from seeing this, whether it's going to be Implant Studio or Simplan or who, but you're just going to start seeing a recommended treatment plan based on their 3 million scans that they hold in their database globally. And then what you'll start to see is once we figure out how fast, once we realize, okay, so when we start deploying algorithms to a data set, we can get this result in this amount of time. Well, the only thing limiting us at that point is the size of the data set. And that basically is just a centralized server where all this data lives. Like all these scans are sitting on, Straumann's, or they're sitting in like a care stream, like these care stream.
So you're talking about the specific
practices.
scans themselves or the treatment plans built around that? Like, let's take it back real quick, because a lot of people don't understand this fully, including myself, right? So when you're talking about, all right, it's going to help me treatment plan. So you have to have, you said, an enormous amount of data, but it's not just scans, right? Like you actually have to have like doctors going through and teaching the AI like what you're supposed to do with this type of information, correct? It's not as simple as just let's just load a bunch of shit in there and see what comes out the other end.
It's a great distinction. That's a really good distinction. Yeah. So what you need at that level, at that point in the process, is you need a scan and you need someone who can annotate a scan and say, this is what this is. Like, this is the mandibular canal. This is the mental foramen. This is, so yeah, you need a doctor actually there with a software engineer or a software engineer who happens to know anatomy to start identifying these things and to kind of put that in. But that's one type of AI. There's two main types of AI. Deep learning is where, you input the rules. The best example for this is AlphaGo. This was a huge story a couple of years ago. It was the first time AI beat a human at the game Go, which is this really ancient Chinese game. Mm-hmm. And it's like a game of war, but there's a lot of strategy. And what they did was they import into the AI.
Wait, and let's back that up. I think I saw something the other day on this where it's like, you take chess and there's X amount of possible moves, and this is like infinitely more than that, correct? Or do I have that?
Yeah, backwards? Go is. You're right. Yeah, Go is way more. There's like way more moves per in a game that can happen than over chess. So they taught it the rules, and then they said, here's 100,000 games played between humans. Study it, which it did in a week.
Yep.
And then it was able to play well enough that it could basically beat a human. Well, deep learning is where you don't import any human games. You just teach it the rules, and it plays itself 1 million times by lunch.
Oh, wow.
It just plays itself over and over and over and over and over again, and it learns rules. So that like the first version, it took months and months, and it was actually like it lost a game to a human. It ended up being like the 9-dan champion of the world, like the world champion. It beat him, but it lost the game to him. When they did the deep learning version, it was just that version, that AI version beats every Go player in the world, and the regular AI version without any trouble
because
at all.
It's ran that many simulations of every single type of move that could be played against it, every type of situation, right?
Exactly. And it gets a little bit into like the Terminator and Skynet. You're like, oh my God, because it almost seems as if you input human games, it just slows it down. Just give it the freedom to play it itself as much as it wants, knowing the rules. So my point in bringing it back to dentistry is that once we can start to import some of the rules, like, this is what this always is. This is what the mental foramen is. And this is where the sinus is. And you could start having it say, this is what a defect is. This is a lesion, all that stuff. And just have it look at 1 million scans and start teaching itself, and you gamify it. You're talking about something that's going to be more accurate than we could ever be. And it'll generate a treatment plan for you that you can trust would be really highly accurate.
The interesting thing about that, though, right? Like, you need objective things to tell it, like yes or no, black or white, right? But with dentistry, oh man, there's a lot of
the rules aren't as clear.
Not even close, exactly. Right? Everybody has different definitions, different rules that they apply.
Exactly, and that's why it won't happen as soon as it did with a game like Go or with chess, because the rules aren't that clear. Yeah, not every occlusal. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of differences.
Yeah, like how much decay equals this, and how much, you know what I'm saying? Like, what are the limitations of each type of implant that you place, and what is this and that? Is like there's just so many different variables, especially in the oral space. Like, it's crazy. How do you teach an occlusion? Sure. Right? Like that's crazy. Exactly. And is it static or is it dynamic? Does it take the bite in multiple different positions? Like, it's based on the information it has. So, I mean, for that's an insane amount of data, right? For it to learn. And we don't even have all that data.
And so, and that, before we took a step back, that's kind of where I was going, was to say that, it will take, obviously it's going to take a lot of time, but the only thing holding us back is going to be the amount of scans that we can train the algorithms on. So once you have a huge database, so like one company that has a huge database and is going to achieve this really great thing where, forget about occlusal planes. They're not only are they doing that, not only are they recommending treatment plans, but like they now have been doing it for a few years and they're like 99.999% successful, outcomes, less invasive, all this stuff. You're going to go, wow, the only thing holding us back now is that if we could feed this thing more scans, if we had access to more data. So here's the problem with that. Healthcare, all the data in healthcare lives in silos.
Yep.
So this is the next big, this is the next frontier for healthcare. Healthcare, we already know has a ton of inefficiencies. It's ripe for change. But the big thing that's going to happen that we're going to see, I think, and it's already happening, you've got a lot of companies working on it, is how do we release this information and get it out there so we can start training algorithms on it? Because you've got HIPAA. It's not like finance or manufacturing where there's like this. We have a huge oversight. We've got a lot of policy, a lot of regulation rightfully to protect patients. But if we can figure out, and there's already some really smart computer scientists figuring it out with things like zero trust protocols and stuff like
that. What is that? I have no idea what that is, by the way.
So zero trust type stuff would be, so imagine that you go to your dentist and you always have to fill out that sheet. You got to fill out your patient data. When you go to any office, ophthalmologist, general practitioner, you're filling out this information, a few sheets and a waiver and all that. And then, all that information now gets either stored as a paper or gets turned digital in that particular office's database. So that's the silo I'm talking about. It just lives there.
Yeah, it's not all interconnected. It's not interconnected. Like we don't have a medical system that allows for that right now. Like that's why you have people dying of drug overdoses or like mixed medications because one doctor over here is prescribing this medication, one doctor here, and they didn't communicate at all. Right?
It's a huge
and you
problem.
Can't trust the patient to know that shit.
And a lot of times they don't know
of course.
it. So that's a whole issue in and of itself is the accuracy of this information and how do we verify it. But zero trust would mean, so instead of you filling out those papers at your doctor's office, you have all of your data basically in an app or in a couple of apps on your phone, and you can flick it to the office and they don't actually take any of your data on their server. There's a digital handshake that happens without the sending or receiving of information. They just go check, check, check. So all they need to know basically is that you don't have a history of XYZ and that you're not a blah, blah, blah. You're not a smoker. You're not on drugs. Like they just need to know a few things. Like they don't need to know your eye color or your height.
That would be so helpful across all medical and dental and every other, you know what I mean?
Right. So it just gets efficient with what information gets shared, and it's not even putting that information on that server. So it's making you more secure because hacks are happening all the time. It's a very easy thing to do. So we're avoiding the risk of your information getting hacked from that dentist office. But we're also making it, putting kind of the control into your hands because you decide what people say.
I mean, okay, let's talk about this. That's very interesting to me. So what's preventing that though from moving forward? Because otherwise you'd basically have to make it government run, which you don't really want the government to know all your medical history anyways. That's probably bad precedent to even look at that side of it, right? Like that's not good.
Don't want that. No, the difficulty now is how do you make it HIPAA compliant while also preserving the ownership to where the current laws assign ownership. So
that
right
should
now,
be the patient's
your
ownership of it, right? Like
partially. Well, actually, right now in the current laws, the patient doesn't really own any of it. If a doctor, so in the example of images, the doctor that takes your image actually owns your image because he bought the capital equipment that took your image, so he owns your DICOM.
Gotcha.
The company who manufactured that, for example, Vatek, Carestream, Instrumentarium, whatever you want, whatever the CBCT is, they're allowed to custody it. So they can custody it. They don't own it, but they can use it for their own research purposes. Or if they're developing their own AI, they can ask the doctor to share it and they can. Or they can, a lot of times they're going to custody it because maybe they're helping the doctor treatment plan, whatever. But right now the doctor's the owner. Now those laws might change. Like Google is working on, there's like a Google AI task force and they're working on some of this stuff. It's kind of blockchain combined with AI. And they're seeing what they can do because the potential is so exciting.
Well, yeah, because if you could combine all that data across all industries and when it comes to the medical space, because the only way I could see it being centralized efficiently right now is through the insurance companies, and that's probably not a great methodology either, to be honest with you. Right? Like, because they always have our best interest in mind, right? Like, and therein lies the issue: who's got the the amount of money to be able to pull this thing off. And then also they're going to want to profit massively from it, which makes sense. I mean, I understand that, but like right now I only see like maybe some tech companies, maybe some insurance companies, and the insurance companies already have the access to, these huge databases of their own clients already. On the tech side, then you have the issue of like trying to break into the space and get access to those people at scale, right? Like, so there seems like a lot of barriers to that ever coming to fruition, especially here in the US.
You're right. No, you're really right. I mean, the payers are a huge hurdle. Trying to get payers on board is obviously the big hurdle, and they've got a ton of information, and you've got to make it worth their time.
Yeah, because I can't see the average person wanting to pay X amount of dollars, even if it's $1 to do this. I mean, being honest, like it sounds great. Like I would do it. I know that my wife would do it for her mother. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it makes so much sense, but I know the average person is probably just not going to do it unless it's free. Right. And the only way it's free is if you're the product, which means somebody's getting your data.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. No, so like I said, there are companies working on it. There's a lot of promise there. I think it's exceptionally exciting.
So solve the problem for me real quick, Christian. Solve that massive problem in 2 seconds. Go for
it. I'm not. Did you think you had Elon Musk on the show today, dude? This is.
Oh no, no, I did not. Much more interesting.
I can't stutter. I don't know how anybody can stutter that much and still be a genius and sound that smart.
I think what he's doing is trying to break it down for these simple apes, including myself, to understand. Right? Like, right. I think that's what he's doing.
He makes me feel good at the beginning of a talk because like, this guy's stuttering like crazy, and then after 2 minutes, he just blew my mind.
Yeah, and also the world's ending, or I'm saving it, or we're moving to Mars, or some crazy shit.
And I don't know. I don't know what I guess the answer would be. So there are some really cool companies working on this. There's a company called Burst IQ out of Denver that's got some pretty big contracts, and they're trying to build what I just said. They're trying to kind of de-silo health information from electronic medical records and kind of get it in places where you might be able to A, empower patients, and then B, start developing AI in a more applicable, user-friendly, health outcome increasing way.
Dude, that's pretty cool. Like I didn't think about the data sets and all that. Like, I mean, because like I knew some of this information, but now that we're talking, like actually really thinking it through, like how complex and how much of an issue it can be, that like we could really solve some massive issues. We could stop, because I mean, listen, if you go in the ER, if you go into a lot of places, most of the time, most of the errors come from like, especially with like pharmacology stuff, that's coming from humans. That's the error. Right. So if we could solve this issue, and I think, and I keep going to the pharma side because that seems to be, a major issue, right? Mixing medications, and there's so many different reactions you can have by, taking multiple medications. That alone, it could solve so many problems, because there's apps right now where you guys probably don't know this, but I've seen it in the hospital setting where they're putting in the medications humans are to put it into an app to double check that the thing I'm prescribing won't kill this person mixed with this medication. Because how could they know it all?
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you could have that in automated, you already know all the patient's information, or if you could upload like the results from all their blood work and this and that, and it can predictively say, hey, I know they're working on this too, but because I saw this from a different doctor I talked to, where you could enter all your information and it's predictive of like what's your highest risk for based on all this data sets that you were talking about before. Like, okay, I've got high cholesterol and I've got diabetes runs in my family and a billion different things. Okay, you're more likely to die from X, Y, and Z, or these foods and these enzymes and these proteins would actually help you. Like even from a dietary standpoint, it can predict what's best for you to prevent you from going down a negative health path.
And I think what you're talking about is the personalized health.
Yes,
that's the personalized health revolution. Like personalized, customizable to each single person. And I think again, getting back to getting this information out of silos, the only way to really effectively, first of all, you have to get verified information. You can't have people like going into an emergency care room or going to a doctor when they're already sick. They're probably already on medication. They're filling out health information on the sheet. Can't remember if my aunt had non-Hodgkin's. I think she did. Like,
oh yeah,
a lot of this family history information you're filling in, it's not always accurate. So yeah, there's got to be a way to verify it, and for everyone to kind of have a way to operate it like that's the next killer app, I think, too. Like talk about a
Oh
killer
yeah,
app.
or giving permission to
What's the
connect
next
to
one?
family members because you may not know all their health history or things they had gone through, but like and maybe they don't want you to see access to it, but allow the information to say of these things privately which they have, right? Like that would be kind of
If
crazy.
Ancestry is, or not Ancestry, the other one that's going public is
Yeah.
23andMe. And she's the CEO of that. Wozniak is, I think it's Sergey Brin or Larry Page's wife, whatever. But she knows all this, which is like, it's all about, it's the data game. You want to try to get people to give you as much data as possible. What she's alluded to wanting to do, because that's just a genealogy site like Ancestry.com. But
Yeah.
imagine if you started up, or at least sharing some of your health data with a 23andMe or Ancestry. So not only does it connect you with all of your cousins across the world, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth cousins, which it already
Yep.
does. It'll tell you if you've got, but now it'll say, hey, listen, by the way, your third cousin also had a malignant tumor before 50. And let's start looking at what DNA you share. And let's start looking at, like, imagine how helpful that would be.
It's terrifying and helpful, right? Because then you give so much power to one entity, right? So it freaks me out. And it also is super cool.
It's true. And that's the problem, is that we're never going to get this stuff approved in the public sector.
No.
If we don't start talking about the technology that makes it
secure it's like,
safe.
What do? You don't do it with the government, right? Because that has inherent issues. And you have the private sector, which is inherently selfish, right? Like they're there to make a profit. So it becomes this game of like, you just need like a benevolent, massively rich person that you trust, right? Like, okay, let's say Bill Gates, but now you have all these conspiracy theories with Bill Gates, or do you go to Elon Musk, who's either the savior of the world or the ender of it? We don't know yet. Or, like there's only a handful of people who could pull that off, right?
At the end of the day, even if it's a decentralized protocol that's kind of running the system, there still usually is a headquarters somewhere.
Yeah,
you can always go knock on the door and find the person in charge, and that is kind of on one hand, the public sector won't probably approve anything that doesn't have a board of executives and officers. But there is, we do know that through decentralized protocols, you can build it. It's a matter of, well, who's responsible for it.
All right. So besides AI, because I think we could go down this rabbit hole and we don't have enough time for that, right? What other technology do you think? Let's be specific to dentistry, since that's most of the people listen to the podcast. Any other technologies that you're like really bullish on?
I really, I work where I work because I think that heads up surgery, real-time navigation, I just think is the way to go. Once you've done it, it's addicting. To your point earlier, I do think some oral surgeons who have just become very quick over a 20 or 30-year career with their hands and have very adept surgical hands are hesitant toward putting something that seems to be like a barrier between them and their work.
Yeah.
And I think you were absolutely hit that on the head. But I think over time it'll get adopted. Because when you can look at the site in person and then also look at the 3D, you have two ways to look at what you're doing. I just think that's such a value. It's so cool to me. I mean, being in those,
it's in a way, it's like a step between that and augmented reality, right? Like it's like the next stepping stone would be augmented reality, where you don't even have to look at the screen. You could have your glasses on, which they've tried, but it's been more of a novelty so far, right?
It has. There's a lag they can't get over. Yeah, our company worked with an augmented reality company, and there's Augmetics, and Augmetics has done some they're in surgical operatories with their stuff, but it's a lot. You got to wear an extra headset.
Yep,
it's not super comfy. God forbid that there ever is a lag for whatever reason, or the power goes out. You got to find a few ways to make it a little more fail-proof. I'm not as stoked about.
Well, there's augmented reality, right? And then you have, I mean, obviously I would consider them competitors in your space. You have the Yomi robot, right? So it's a little cross prohibitive right now, right? But what do you see as like the next evolution of what you're doing dynamic? Because I categorize that very similarly, right? Because you still have to push the handpiece and everything, but essentially it's very similar, right? One is just more mechanically based, right, as opposed to user based, right?
Their robot, right? You're still pushing the handpiece, which you're probably like me. You're like, well, that's not really a robot, but it's getting there.
Sure.
We may or may not have a robot in the works at some point. I can't fully.
Yeah, you probably can't disclose that. I mean, you could,
but like people or companies, I could. I think I can say that we may or may not have something there, but I'll say that is exciting. The barrier there, Shane, is and Yomi proved this. So many doctors don't even want to engage in a technology that even hints at replacing their hand.
Sure.
At some point, that was a lot of the market feedback. Yes, they've sold units. Yes, there's a lot of buzz around Yomi. It is an exciting technology. It obviously, I mean, their predecessor was the Da Vinci, which is doing, I think, 12 or 13 procedures now. They're doing hernias and floor repair. But to me, that's less exciting just because working in the market as long as I have and knowing as many providers as I know.
Well, yeah, I would imagine the provider thinks it devalues their skill set, which they're not wrong.
Yeah, whether or not they're wrong, I just think that pushing as a salesperson that would have to push that, and as a marketing team and as a group of engineers trying to push through that muck and get that technology to market when you've got that much psychological resistance, to me, that kind of makes it more of a burden than fun.
All right. Well, what would be the only thing I'll disagree with you here is, and not in dental at all, right? In the dental space, I'm kind of like, I don't really know. I don't really know how I feel fully. I see both sides of it, but I could see a scenario where you have like the best brain surgeon in the world. I think they're already doing some of this stuff, like in one side of the world, and you have this baby who needs brain surgery over here or heart surgery or something, and they're just, this is the man or woman in the field who's just, that's the only person who can do it. Theoretically, if the bandwidth was, good enough, right? If what are we on now? Like, was it 5G? Maybe it's 6G technology, whatever it is, that right. There's literally no gap in time. Maybe it's this Neuralink stuff that Elon Musk's working on, but where you could do the surgery, virtually, where the robot's actually doing it on the patient from across the world, theoretically, right?
Oh, they have that. Well, no, they have that. They have that in beta right now. At University of San Diego Telemedicine Center. I was in San Diego, so I think it's just south of La Jolla, or in La Jolla. They've got a Da Vinci robot that's a port to a sister robot in Africa.
Oh, wow.
And the doctor puts his hands into these gloves that go into a little, like a little nook, and he's operating inside, and he's seeing a display of what the teleporting port is sending him, and he's doing the surgery. Now, last I checked, which was a few years ago, there was still a 3-second lag time,
which is an infinite lag time in certain situations.
Not going to work yet. But I don't know where they are today. I mean, they might. That's to your point. 6G will probably.
Holy crap, that'd be awesome. You know what's interesting about that, bro? Do you play video games at all? I don't anymore, but that's only because
I used to. Yeah.
So it's funny that all the parents are saying, "Oh, video games are rot your brain," but in theory, if you had a medical degree and you were great at playing video games, that's basically where things are headed.
That's where surgery is going. How funny is that? You're absolutely right.
100%, right?
You're 100% right.
Well, if you look at the control systems now that they're using for drones and stuff, it looks like an Xbox controller.
Exactly. I saw that.
They built it. They built it that way because people were used to using that, especially the age range, and they're using younger people because they're better with it, right? Their hands just naturally move that way.
It's more intuitive for them.
Of course.
Yeah.
All right, that's where we got to get to. All right, now we got to create a video game for dental, right? That's actually fun to play,
right?
And then we'll figure it all out, man.
Right.
All right, we're about to wrap this, but let's do something a little different now. Besides just the technology side, what's your passion outside of dentistry and technology? Throwing you off here, I didn't know I was asking this one.
Yeah, that's a great question. Like outside of work in general,
what do you like to do?
Outside of professional or just
what's that?
I really, man, in the last. Am I still here?
Yeah, you're good.
Man, I really, as I've gotten older, I suppose, I feel so lucky that we have so much information basically available. Like I got a YouTube premium membership.
Nice. And
I get to listen to some of the coolest content. Like you can listen to Peter Thiel talking at the New York Economist Club. Like these like clubs that, guys like me wouldn't have been able to listen
100% really nerd over here, folks. Love it.
I'm telling you, man, like I love doing that. I love just listening to some of the brightest minds talk about where we're going and stuff. It's just really spend a lot of time doing that these days.
All right. What's the last thing you want to leave with the audience here?
So I think, oh man, be excited and ask if you're a doctor, talk to your reps and ask them questions about what their companies are developing. Because here's what's true. Everybody in COVID was hibernating and waiting to come out, and they were figuring out their next move professionally or technologically if they were an engineer. Everybody's been, so just like talk, ask questions, see what your company's been working on, what their R&D department's coming up with, and ask people what they're excited about. It's going to be full velocity, I think, this summer. I'm just so excited about the rest of the year.
Dude, cool nerd over here, guys. He is excited about technology. He's got me excited about it too. And I'm a nerd, but for so many other reasons. But guys, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next All In podcast. Thanks, Christian. Appreciate you, brother.
Thanks, Shane. Later, man.
Thanks for listening to the All In podcast. See you next time.